Magic the Gathering is a pay-to-win game. I don't think anybody would fight you on that. Everyone agrees that there is some degree of power that you can buy. And if you're not going to spend the money, you have to get really creative with how you are using the lower cost cards. Most of the consideration when you're building a deck or building a collection is how much money you want to spend and how competitively you want to play. But I think there's a third consideration that doesn't get talked about enough. I saw a question the other day and it sparked my memory. How much fun can you buy in Magic the Gathering? And so that's what I want to talk about today. How can we determine that balance between enjoyability, affordability, and competitive play? So pull up a chair, have a seat at the table, and whether you're a button mash hack and slash controller bash, or a meeple moving mastermind of maps, mats, and minis, if you ruffle at the awful riffle shuffle scuffle, or if you're a click clack pick attack number ball luck sack, we're all here for the same reason. I'm Jake, let's talk games. So let's start at the top. Is Magic a pay-to-win game? I think we can pretty safely say yes, but let's break it down a little bit. Start with why Magic cards cost money. It's not because of the material that they're made out of. Ultimately, they are just cardboard. It's very nice cardboard, but it's just cardboard. Magic is a game entirely driven by gameplay. Other games like Pokemon have this weird split between collectors and players of the game, and there's some overlap there, but for the most part, cards will become expensive based on scarcity or playability, but there's so many different versions of cards printed that playability doesn't drive cost nearly so much. Magic doesn't have quite the same level of variance in their prices. And some of it has to do with the way that cards are printed and the quantities that get released, and which things are gated behind promos and secret layers, and which things are pretty broadly available. But for the most part, Magic cards are expensive because they're good. The cards that people want, they are willing to pay more money for. And any given deck, your resources, your lands, are going to be the most important. And so because of that, lands have crept up there in cost. And now you can safely expect to spend between $8 and $20 on any of your non-basic lands, which generally is most of them. So you're over $100 now just on land. Sometimes over $200 or more. If you get back into the legacy and vintage formats or EDH, the cost of your mana base skyrockets. And if you're playing a suboptimal mana base, you are starting off way behind the rest of the table. No matter whether you're playing competitively or casually, I highly recommend that the first place you start upgrading is your lands. And it's boring, and it kind of stinks to spend that amount of money on cards that don't actually do things, but it allows the rest of your deck to do things. And that's the most important part, right? So because of that, Magic kind of becomes a pay-to-win game. Occasionally you'll see a budget deck take off and be really successful, but they're always one color, they're always trying to do something super fast or super low to the ground, and so they're built mostly of commons, and those decks can be really successful. But for the most part, you take a random assortment of expensive cards, and a random assortment of inexpensive cards. The expensive cards are going to win. So now let's flip that around. What happens in a budget deck? How should we approach building a super low budget deck? What we want to look for is unique effects, or half of effects, that exist on extremely low cost cards that do similar things to those high price cards, just to differentiate between dollars and mana costs. And if you can load your deck up with cards that do the things you want to do sort of well at a much reduced price, you can build a really efficient, effective budget deck. A lot of the cards that I own, that I use today, I bought 10, 15, 20 years ago. A few of my cards are almost as old as I am. But the reality is they're still usable, and a lot of them are still powerful enough to be included in a lot of different formats. So when we build our decks, I think it's important that we look at the long term. Look at what we are looking to do with each thing that we buy. If you buy a booster pack to use it for a pack battle, that's awesome. The first 10 minutes of life for that pack is going to be going into gameplay. You're going to challenge an opponent, you're going to shuffle 2 lands of each type in, and you're going to be able to duke it out. If you're buying those couple of jumpstart packs, shuffle them together, immediately get down to a game. That can be a lot of fun. But then those cards might get shuffled away, organized, put into a box. And most of those probably aren't going to get used again. Maybe a couple of the rares are useful. Maybe you got lucky and pulled one of the set cards. And that might get used in an EDH deck down the line, or, brought back out to teach someone else how to play, taking your simple cards, building a starter deck from it. I think it could be really fun to think about where these cards go and how they march from standard into not being used very often to modern, into never being used in legacy, not even being worth it in vintage, and then getting shuffled into an EDH deck and being the star of the show. Magic cards last forever. So I've said this before, but Magic the Gathering isn't a game. It's a whole bunch of games that all just happen to use the same game pieces. And so when you buy a card or a deck, it usually fits into a number of those different types of games. And because of that, it fits into a different variety of fun. Different people are looking for different things out of the game. Some people are really interested in one particular format, and sometimes one particular deck in one particular format. I think there's a lot of people that only want to play Commander. But there's also a lot of people that only want to draft. I've run into people that only play Modern. And I've also run into people that play everything. Some of those people are casual, just want to sit down, shuffle up some cards, play a couple games, and they don't really care, win or lose. They want to use budget stuff, they want to build weird strategies. Some people play really competitively. They chase the meta. They look for the best possible deck that they can build at every point in time. If that involves buying a bunch of cards, it could be very expensive. If they just want to hang back and chill in a format, playing casually, it can be really cheap. So depending on what fun you are looking for, what aspect of the game you enjoy, and which formats you want to build for, the cost of that fun can be very different. So let's talk about numbers a little bit. When we talk about buying fun in Magic the Gathering, I think the baseline is just what it costs to play with your friends group. If everybody is looking for the same type of fun, the game is practically free. If somebody came up to me and said, hey, I really want to play Magic, don't know where to start, and I don't have any cards, I could throw together a deck from my leftover cards that would be on par with a lower powered precon and just give it to them. Start that fun immediately. And if you are buying into this, most play groups are going to be playing Commander. It's the reality of the game right now, and you can buy a Commander deck for $30 to $40, and that'll be pretty good. If you want to buy a mediocre Commander deck and upgrade it, I've seen some going for as low as $24. And once you have that Commander deck, you can start playing the game and start having fun. And then those upgrades, the additional money that you have to add to the deck to make it worthwhile, doesn't have to be instant. It doesn't even have to be remotely close. The game's been going for a very long time, and it'll be going for a very long time into the future. Take your time. Wait until you're not having fun anymore, and then reevaluate. Would buying more cards add to the fun? Would buying a second deck change the fun? Trying different formats, trying different people, teaching someone new how to play the game. Maybe your fun comes from building decks. And if that's the case, getting a bunch of garbage and building the best deck you can from that garbage is going to be a lot of fun. And if you like to win, maybe setting some constraints on yourself. What is the winningest deck I can make for the least amount of money? What's the best Zada deck I could build? What's the best Feather deck I could build? Try to optimize for that fun aspect, whatever that means to you. Because I know that a lot of people think that Magic is an expensive game. But after playing it for a very long time and having spent a lot of money on it, I think you can get fun from the game for practically nothing. And once you have a deck that you like, and a deck that you consistently find fun, win or lose, you're in a pretty good position. Because you have found the infinite fun machine. And until that stops being fun, you're set. So to answer the question of how much fun can you buy in Magic the Gathering, my answer is pretty much infinite.